For all its beauty and splendor, the ocean can be a cruel teacher. Sea kayaking can be breathtakingly dangerous, and underestimating it is a near guarantee of disaster. The sea is an unpredictable, relentless force, and for anyone venturing out in a tiny, fragile kayak, every element is against you. Weather can change in an instant, transforming calm seas into violent, crushing waves that can capsize even the most experienced kayakers. Let's venture back to the unforgiving ocean where survival is earned, not given. This is Outdoor Disasters. For Andrew McAuley, his expedition across the Tasman Sea would be treacherous. Andrew McAuley was born on August 7, 1968, in Goulburn, New South Wales. As a youngster, Andrew and his brother Michael would embark on adventures that included swimming, tree climbing, and even cliff diving. As a young adult, Andrew McAuley's fearlessness and hunger for adventure frequently took him around the world. On one trip to Patagonia in the late 1990s, McAuley found his love for kayaking. After getting caught in a bad storm while mountaineering, he and his friends kayaked through the Chilean fjords. It was then that McAuley realized the power of the sport. He could still progress through any weather that came his way. After this event, McAuley dove headfirst into the sport, taking up increasingly difficult challenges. As Andrew moved into adulthood, he began to shape his dreams into goals. His love for nature grew into a calling for extreme kayaking. He sought to take his passion beyond the thrill of whitewater and technical maneuvers. For him, it was about connecting with the vastness of nature in a profoundly intimate way. Andrew's kayaking was not merely a sport. It was a means of pushing his mind and body to their limits and expressing his need to test himself in isolation. His expeditions took him to the cold, turbulent waters and the imposing glaciers of Alaska, each journey adding another layer to his growing legend as an explorer. McAuley quickly gained a reputation within the kayaking community for his remarkable endurance and ability to face almost insurmountable challenges. His love for exploration was palpable, and it was evident that he was continually searching for something greater than himself. In 2003, Andrew McAuley became the first person to kayak a direct, non-stop crossing of the Bass Strait, a treacherous stretch of sea between mainland Australia and the island of Tasmania. In total, his 136-mile trip took 35 hours to complete. Another trip included an almost 330-mile journey across the Gulf of Carpentaria, located in northern Australia. The trip took McAuley a week to complete, and he became familiar with sleeping in his kayak overnight. To commemorate McAuley's outstanding accomplishments, the Australian Geographic Society awarded McAuley the Adventurer of the Year award in 2005. Andrew McAuley was not one to lead a life of quiet contentment. From his youth, he sought the edges of what was considered possible. His adventures began modestly, with hikes and climbs in the Australian wilderness. But as he grew older, his ambitions swelled. With every risk he took, he pushed the boundaries of his body and spirit, finding solace and purpose in the wild. But there was one challenge he couldn't shake from his mind: a solo kayak crossing of the Tasman Sea, an unforgiving stretch of water between Australia and New Zealand. It is approximately 2,000 kilometers or 1,200 miles across at its widest point and covers an area of about 2.3 million square kilometers or 890,000 square miles. Due to strong currents, weather fronts, and waves, the Tasman Sea can be quite hazardous for seafaring. Cyclones and large swells are common, especially during certain times of the year, making it a challenging area for ships and recreational watercraft alike. No one had ever attempted such a crossing, but Andrew believed he could be the first. He knew the Tasman well. It was fierce and wild, a place with 10-meter swells that could swallow a kayak without a trace. To paddle across was an idea teetering on madness, but Andrew, undeterred, said he would do it. Those around him spoke of the risks. His father, a Navy man, recalled the Tasman's violence, swells that rose and fell like mountains, dwarfing the antennas of naval destroyers. And yet, as they described the horrors he might face, Andrew's answer remained firm: yes, he would go. By December 2006, Andrew had prepared himself physically and mentally for the journey. His wife, Vicky, shared his love of adventure and understood the yearning that drove him, even if it meant risking everything. To cross the Tasman, Andrew needed more than just endurance and courage. He needed a kayak that could withstand the Tasman's wrath. With the help of engineers, he designed Kayak 1, a vessel equipped with a small capsule where he could rest in cramped, mummy-like confinement. The design was groundbreaking, but it came with limitations. If the kayak capsized, the capsule could potentially flood, leaving Andrew vulnerable. Andrew's mind was unshakable, even as he knew that one misstep could mean disaster. He had trained rigorously, preparing for every conceivable danger, from hypothermia to capsizing. Meteorologists advised him on weather systems, teaching him how to read the clouds and interpret the ocean's moods. In the days leading up to his departure, a quiet sense of confidence replaced his fears. On the day of his departure, Andrew and Vicky held each other tightly on the beach, both reluctant to let go. Vicky, his wife, loved him enough to let him go, but not without fear or pain. The night he left was like something torn in two. Vicky clung to their son, Finley. Their small family joined in a last embrace as she watched her husband push off into the unknown. She didn't ask him to stay, though she wanted to. She knew that asking would be the same as asking him to betray who he was. She shouted goodbye as he paddled away, crying in misery at the idea of leaving his family. His young son yells, "See you in New Zealand, Daddy," and he was gone. On January 11, 2007, 39-year-old Andrew McAuley paddled away from Australia's coast alone in the vast expanse of the sea. Each day he pushed himself for hours on end, moving ever closer to his dream. He had crossed the Bass Strait, done the Gulf of Carpentaria, each journey building toward this, his last challenge, the Tasman. But this was no ordinary expedition. As he paddled through the Southern Ocean, the wind tore at him, waves rose high as walls, and cold seeped into his bones. Days became nights, nights became a blur of stars, cold, and the relentless, unyielding sea. Fear was his constant companion, but he met it head-on, saying that fear took him places in his mind that the calm world of land never could. Yet he admitted quietly into his radio, "I am scared. This is hard." But he kept going, motivated by the thought of seeing his family again and the chance to make history. His days were filled with silence, interrupted only by the rhythm of his paddling and the occasional call with Vicky, who anxiously awaited each check-in. Vicky and Finley waited for Andrew in their small home. The silence grew heavy as the days passed. There was pride but also dread. When he spoke to Vicky on the radio, his voice cracking, he mentioned the harshness of it all, the exhaustion, the hallucinations, and his decision to turn back once due to hypothermia. Each time he would go as far as he could, test the limits of his body and mind, and then turn back only when he knew he couldn't go further. Yet each time he turned back, it was clear he wouldn't give up. He told Vicky he'd try again, the challenge clinging to him like the salt on his skin. Andrew encountered massive swells and storms, but his spirit remained unbroken. The ocean tested him, sending towering waves that tossed his kayak as if it were a mere speck on the water. He endured sleepless nights, unrelenting cold, and physical exhaustion. Yet his determination never wavered. The journey took him deep into the Tasman, past the point of rescue. His friends told him of the dangers of leaving his family behind, but Andrew could not be moved. This journey, this crossing, was his alone. And so he went further than anyone thought possible, keeping to a strict routine of radio reports and weather updates. Days blended into weeks, the weather's mood shifting from calm to violent storms that battered his small craft. The sea roared around him, but Andrew pressed forward, his mind and body attuned to the waves, the wild winds, and the cold bite of the Southern Ocean. But in the deep of the Tasman, a storm rose, a storm like those that had swallowed ships whole. Andrew's kayak, barely more than a capsule floating on that furious expanse, was buffeted, lifted by waves that loomed over him like giants. 10-meter swells broke over him, The wind clawed at his canopy, and each night he lay trapped inside that kayak, listening to the creaking and groaning of his tiny vessel as it tried to right itself. Inside his tiny capsule, he felt like a prisoner, trapped as the kayak was battered by the ocean. Friends and family back home anxiously awaited his daily transmissions, fearing the worst as hours passed without word from him. Finally, a message came through. All is fine. Terrifying start. All okay. The relief was palpable, but Andrew knew the ocean was far from done with him. Despite the storm, Andrew continued to paddle, each mile bringing him closer to his goal. But the strain was taking a toll. Alone in his kayak, he confessed to his camera that he was struggling, questioning his ability to complete the journey. "I'm right at my limit," he admitted, feeling the weight of the miles behind him and the endless ocean ahead. Yet he pushed forward, fueled by the hope of reuniting with Vicky and Finley. 3 weeks into his voyage, Andrew was on the brink of making history. He was within a day's paddle of New Zealand's shore, and everyone, his family, the media, the Rescue Coordination Center, was waiting in anticipation of his arrival. But then came a brief, fragmented transmission. In the early hours of a stormy night, a faint and distorted radio transmission echoed across the airwaves. "Kayak 1, do you copy?" The message was garbled, the voice barely decipherable but unmistakably filled with urgency. The adventurer Andrew McAuley was attempting something extraordinary, and now something had gone wrong. The moment marked the final entry in a story that would be remembered as both inspiring and tragic, a journey that blended courage and heartbreak. Rescue teams scoured the waters, hoping to find him alive. But all they found was his kayak, floating adrift 80 kilometers from New Zealand's Milford Sound. Andrew was nowhere to be seen. The capsule had been damaged in the storm, and a crucial attachment point had broken, making it impossible for him to right the kayak if it capsized. The ocean had claimed him. It was hard to accept that this man who had come so close had been claimed by the sea. Vicky didn't want to believe it. Not until the police brought news, not until she saw the kayak, the hollow shell of what had once carried him so far. She held their son and remembered Andrew as the man he was, brave, stubborn, forever chasing something that others could only dream of. The news of Andrew's disappearance hit hard. Friends, family, and adventurers worldwide mourned the loss of a man who had dared to dream beyond the boundaries of possibility. Vicky and Finley were left with a void that no words could fill, a loss made all the more painful by the knowledge that Andrew had been so close to his goal. He had crossed the Tasman, defied the odds, and pushed himself to the brink, only to be stopped just short of shore. Andrew's story became a symbol of both the beauty and the peril of exploration. He had gone where few dared, touching the raw edge of life in his pursuit of something greater than himself. While some questioned his decision to undertake such a dangerous journey, others saw him as an embodiment of the human spirit's boundless curiosity and resilience. Andrew McAuley became a legend that day, not because he reached the shore, but because he faced the Tasman and crossed its vast, deadly heart. He made it farther than anyone believed possible. He may not have touched the land of New Zealand, but he crossed that ocean in his small kayak, and those who knew him, those who loved him, knew he had achieved what he'd set out to do. The last words spoken about him were full of pride. He made it. Anyone who said otherwise didn't know Andrew McAuley or the spirit that drove him, a spirit that, like the Tasman Sea, could not be tamed. To be an adventurist is to choose a hard road. You take the risk not because you are reckless, but because there is something in you that needs it, something fierce and restless that cannot be put to sleep by easy comforts. You go out into the world to find what's left to conquer, knowing well that the cost is high, knowing that those who love you pay it too. But every time you go, you leave behind faces watching the door, hands wringing in quiet worry, voices that wonder if you'll return whole or if you'll return at all. They live with the silence that follows you, with the empty spaces you leave behind like ghosts in the home. They say they understand, that they admire what you do, but each step you take into the unknown wears on them. They feel every cold mountain you climb, every wave you paddle through, every storm you face as if they were there with you, gripping the edge of their seats in silent prayer. Yet, you go. You go because that's the life you know, the life that speaks to you like nothing else. You live for the struggle, the moments when you're stripped of everything but raw will and instinct, where life is honest and fierce. And to those who love you, that life is a storm they cannot escape, a risk they did not choose but carry all the same. It's a bond and it's a burden. You make your peace with it, and so do they. To be an adventurist is to love the wild places of the world, to put your life in the hands of forces that will have you face to face with an outdoor disaster. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more outdoor disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.